machine that made cloth with a spring attachment, and it made it much, much faster. In fact, it was 10 threads in one direction, 18 threads in the other. So it, by a factor of 10 times 18, sped up the cloth making process. Okay? But then you didn't have, the thread, then the cotton, the wool makers couldn't keep up that, or excuse me, the cloth, the spinning couldn't keep up with the weavers, so they had to come up with a new invention. Okay? And eventually it was mechanized. The whole thing was mechanized until Richard Cartwright, okay, invents what's called the power loom. And the power loom is essentially the same machine that they use today to make the clothes on your back. And the power loom combined the spinning and weaving process into one and turned cloth making into an industry. Okay? An industry. Now, the problem was, to power those looms, the only source of power they had up to that point was gravity. Okay? You're from New York. You're not up in the fall line, Troy and Albany areas, and Leominster, Mass, and those places are on what's called the fall line, which is where the mountainous areas of the Appalachians ranges, including the Adirondacks and the Catskills, goes to the plains, and there's gravity that water goes over. So all these cities, Utica, where I grew up, you know, Syracuse, Albany, Poughkeepsie, Troy, you know, all these school places in Massachusetts, and then down along the coast, produced purely cloth because they had gravity, and the gravity would run the machines. Okay? So the only place you could have factories was on rivers and places like that. Okay? Until you had another invention, okay, to provide a new source of power. We'll get to that in a second. Now, so each stage demanded new power sources, is what I'm trying to say. So James Watt, okay, takes a machine that was invented by somebody else. The first, he didn't invent the steam engine, but he made it a practical machine. He made it efficient. Okay? Problem with the early steam engines was that it, where is that here? He made it, sorry, I'm trying to find something here. Oh, shoot. Just a minute. Anyway, he invented the steam engine. I gotta find a picture for me to do this. I had it running before. He made it efficient so that it could not use so much energy as it did before. And first it was used to pump out water out of mines, but he eventually attached it to a loom and powered a loom with his steam engine. And from there, you were able to and this is the important thing, you were able to build your factory anywhere. You didn't have to build it anywhere on a river, okay? So the important consequence of the steam engine where are you going to build your factory? So you can make a factory. Are you going to build a factory out in the Everglades? No, why not? Where are you going to get your workers? So where are you going to build your factory?
The city.
In a town. There were hardly any cities back then. Okay? So you're going to build it where there's people. Okay? So that's the important thing. You can put a factory anywhere when you have a steam engine. And so they would put them near a population center. And what happens with that is, when you build it near a population center, the most important fact of the Industrial Revolution, and this is going to be on your test, okay, is the growth of cities. We think of Fort Myers as a city. I don't know how many people. 100,000, 200,000? Anybody know?
Lots heard.
That would have been a major city back in the 1800s. I mean, there were only a couple of cities that big in the whole world, except China. So what happens is, when you build a factory near a place, okay, and you need workers, okay, what happens is that this industry is killed by the Industrial Revolution. Okay? So all those farmers and everybody else who was making clothes or making tools or whatever they're making, all of a sudden were out of business. They couldn't compete with mass-produced products. So it forced them, for their sons and daughters anyway, they couldn't support them on the land, so they had to what? Move to the cities. Okay? So this is what happens in England. You have a surplus of food. So not everybody needs to grow food. So you go from 60% of the population producing food to 10% of the British population producing food by the end of the century. Okay? And that food would go to the cities to feed the people who were working in the factories. So the early stage demanded new power source, and this new power source was the steam engine. Right? Now the other thing that happened, and this is back to Eli Whitney. So you got all these new machines, and there wasn't enough cotton. Right? So the cotton they were getting was from mostly from the southern parts of the United States. Okay? And these were produced on the plantations, which had slaves. Okay? And what happened was, like I said, Eli Whitney comes along, he sees a problem, he solves a problem, he and others invent and improve this machine, and all of a sudden you don't need so many slaves to clean the cotton. They can put to use in other fields. And so for the first time, the demand for cotton is keeping up. Excuse me, the supply of cotton is keeping up with demand. And so this again accelerates the process. So as the Industrial Revolution spreads throughout England and then continental Europe and the northern United States, okay, the demand for cotton keeps getting more and more. So slavery spreads west. It spreads into Tennessee, into Mississippi, into Texas. Right? And they have to get more slaves. And England goes and bans the slave trade in the early 1800s. Check out that movie Wilberforce sometime. Okay? And so there's a tremendous increase in the need for slaves. Right? But it also produces the growth of cities. Now, and what's called the factory system. So cotton becomes an industry. Textiles become an industry. And it's the first industry really of the Industrial Revolution. Okay? And it paved the way for a transition from a rural life to an urban life. We'll talk about that. Imagine being taken from your farm, where you worked hard 120 days a year, and you sort of didn't work so hard the rest of the time. You had plenty of time off, you had holidays and vacations, to a situation where you're working 364 days a year, maybe 363, Christmas and Easter were all you got off. You're working 12 to 14 hours a day. Can any of you imagine working that long? No, I couldn't. And you're barely getting by. And so you're going from that family structure to an anonymous in the city, to filthy, disgusting conditions, to bad food, to unhealthy living conditions, to anonymity, and the way it changes people's lives. We'll get into that in some extension here. But back to Britain. So Britain had tremendous advantages. Okay? The outline, British advantages. By the way, it is my belief and my theory, and not necessarily held by other historians, but I say the Industrial Revolution is still going on today. The shirt I put on today, I happened to look at the label before I put it on. Anybody want to guess where it was made?
China.
No? Good guess. Could have been Sri Lanka, right? Or you might have heard Bangladesh, some of your clothes. Or Vietnam, or China, okay? When I was a kid, they were made in, clothes were made in Taiwan and Japan. But they don't make clothes anymore. So what I'm saying is the Industrial Revolution is still going on because it goes to the poorest countries of the world where they can exploit the workers and pay them. Average Bangladeshi makes what, 30 bucks a month? Remember that factory that crashed and all those people were killed just a few months ago? Anybody remember that? In Bangladesh? And now all these companies, like Ralph Lauren and Gap and everybody else is saying, oh, we better just start inspecting the factories, you know? Where workers are exploited and paid a very low wage. And so that's where the Industrial Revolution is going on. The other effects of the Industrial Revolution, pollution, environmental degradation, we're still paying for. We're still cleaning up the mess of the Industrial Revolution. So in that sense, I say the Industrial Revolution is still going on today. It's just shifting from one part of the world to the next, to the next, to the next poorest place in the world. And that's where the clothes are made. So cotton industry is still the leader. And once you have established a factory system, then they shift to making more things like cars, manufactured goods, bicycles, automobiles, televisions, things like that. And then we go beyond that. That stuff we always made in our country, now it's made, where do you buy your TVs? You buy, they're all made in China. Or they're made in Japan, right? They're not made here anymore, even though we invented a lot of that stuff. So you go from one stage to a different kind of manufacture to a different kind of manufacturing. Unfortunately, America, although we're making a rebound now in manufacturing, has become a service economy. An economy based on banking and finance, high finance. Okay. Anybody want to disagree with that? Okay. By the way, one of the things we want to do in this course is talk about current events, and especially current events that affect you. There was an important thing that happened today in the Senate, and that was they closed debate on whether or not to extend unemployment compensation for another 15 weeks. So if any of you are on unemployment and lost it at the beginning of the month, I mean, if they passes in Congress, then you might get an unemployment check later on. Things like that. But we'll also talk about things that happen in other places. All right, Britain, they had all these advantages. They had a country that was small, that had a efficient. They also had three very important things. They had, for these new machines, steam engines run on what kind of fuel? What kind of fuel? What kind of fuel? Come on, everybody.
Gas.
Don't sit there looking at me. You know what the different kinds of fuel, there's oil, right? There's nuclear, what? Coal, yeah, speak up, come on. Don't sit there afraid to make a mistake. Say something. Coal, yeah, coal. They had a lot of coal, and it was good coal. Like there's bad oil and good oil, right? There's that shale oil, that's terrible stuff that they want to bring down from Canada, right? Just so they keep it out of here, right? Then there's good, pure, you know, that Texas crude, right? Well, there was good coal, good high quality coal to fuel those steam engines. What else they have? What is a steam engine made out of? What's it made out of? What material?
Iron, steel.
Iron. Yeah. Okay. And they had a lot of iron. Okay. So you had coal and you had iron. And you had a lot of it. They also had a lot of other minerals, copper. Okay. This thing, and this is in your book. China clay that makes ovens. Where's the thing here? This is concentrations of industry. Coal fields are in this color here. So these are all coal fields. And so they had plenty of coal. They had iron. They had bauxite. They had anthracite. They had all these other things that were essential for the Industrial Revolution. Okay? Here's your iron here. Okay? In coal fields. Okay? There's iron that says lead, iron, zinc. Okay? All things necessary for the making of machines. So they had the natural resources necessary for the Industrial Revolution. They didn't have cotton, though. That had to come from somewhere else. Okay? So you had steam, you had the steam engine. Okay? You had a sufficient population. They were hardworking. They were inventive. Okay? You had people that were willing to take a risk. This is important. Some of you, your goal might be someday to own your own business. It's a scary thing, right? And a lot of these people who start in business, they went out of business 3 or 4 times before they made it. But you've got to be willing to make a risk. Take a chance. And the British did that. They had the mental attitude to take a chance and take a risk. They also had surplus money to do it with. Okay? And they had a government that supported them. So they had risk, they had government support. They had good communications. Essential. Do you know that I was over in Scotland in May, and my cell phone coverage is 10 times better over there than it is here. My internet connection was 10 times faster over there than it was here. Do you know how far we're behind the good industrial countries in the world for internet speed? It's ridiculous. We're way behind. We think we got it made. We think we're so much better than everybody else. We don't. India even is much, They got all this fiber optic cable everywhere.